Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 I will offer the Mangalacharan prayers to the Guru Shishya Parampara and all the Acharyas. So all together we can say
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Rajesh Prabhu. We just started. Okay. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena
Shri Gurave Namaha.
Shri
Chaitanya
Chaitanya Manobhishtam
Sthapitam Yena Bhutale
Swayam
Mayyam
Dadati Padantikam Vandeham
Sri Guru
Padakamalam
Vaishnavancha
Shri
Rupam
Rupam
Sagrajatam
Sahagana
Raghunathanavitam
Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam He Krishna Karuna
Dinabandhu
Jagate
Jagatpate
Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Sapta
Sapta Kanchana
Gaurangi
Gaurangi
Radhe
Radhe
Vrindavaneshwari
Vrindavaneshwari
Vrishabhanusute
Vrishabhanusute
Devi
Devi
Pranamami
Pranamami
Hari Priye
Haripriye
Vanchakalpatarubhya
Vanchakalpatarubhyacha
Kripa Sindhubhya
Sindhubhya
eva
eva cha
Patitanam
Patitanam
Pavebhyo
Pavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Namo
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 Namaha.
Namo
Namo
Vishnupadaya
Vishnupadaya
Krishna Presthaya
Krishnaya
Bhutale
Bhutale
Srimate
Srimate
Bhakti
Bhakti
Vedanta
Vedanta
Swami
Swami Niti
Namine
Namine
Namaste
Namaste
Saraswate
Saraswate
Devi
Deve
Gauravani
Gauravani
Pracharine
Pracharine
Nirvishesha
Nirvishesha
Shunyavadi
Shunyavadi
Paschati
Paschati
Desatarine
Desatarine
Jaya
Jai
Shri
Shri
Krishna
Krishna
Chaitanya
Chaitanya
Prabhu
Prabhu
Nityananda
Nityananda
Sri
Sri
Advaita
Advaita
Gadadhara
Gadadhara
Srivasadi
Srivastadi
Gaurabhatta
Gaurabhatta
Hare
Hare
Krishna
Krishna
Hare
Hare
Krishna
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 Hare
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 Ram
Rama
Hare
Hare
Ram
Rama
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 Hare
Hare
Hare Shri Krishna Bhagwan ki jai Shri Gopal ki jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai Hare Krishna dear devotees.
Hare
So
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
we are studying chapter 8 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. It's called Akshara Brahma Yoga, and we have read and discussed so far first 5 verses. Okay, when it comes, okay, and yeah, so a few weeks ago we started reading this chapter. So in the beginning, Arjuna, in the first 2 verses, Arjuna asks about 7-8 questions. So where he says, Kim tad brahma, kim adhyatma, kim karma, O Purushottama, adhibhutam cha kim, proktam, adhidaivam kimuchyate. So what is brahma, what is adhyatma, what is karma, and what is adhibhuta, and what is adhidaiva. And in the second verse he says, what is adhiyagnya, adhiyagnya katham kotra, dehesmin madhusudana, and where and how does it live in the body. And then prayana kalecha katham jneyosi niyata atmavi, and how does a person, how and in what form and other things a person can remember you at the time of death or at prayana kal. So far in the first third and fourth verses, Arjuna answers the first 6 questions. So he says, Aksharam Brahma Paramam. So Kshara and Akshara, there are 2 words he uses. In this verse, he uses Akshara, and here he uses Kshara. Akshara is something that is indestructible or eternal, which never changes. So, and that is what is Brahma. So he says, what is Brahma? So the indestructible and transcendental living entity, or the spiritual nature, spiritual energy of the Lord, is called Brahma or Brahman. So Aksharam and Paramam. And Adhyatma is its eternal nature. So Swabhavo Adhyatma Uchyate. So it's the living entity's eternal nature or unchangeable nature is called Adhyatma. And that's why the science about it is called Adhyatmic or spiritual science. And Bhuta Bhava Udbhava Karo. So Bhuta, for a living entity, creating another Bhava, Visarga, that is called Karma. So the activities that a living entity performs in this material world, which creates another material body for that living entity, that activity or that action is called karma. So karma, any material activity is basically karma. So that is creating another body. So karma, we broadly saw in the 4th chapter, karma, vikarma and akarma. So karma and vikarma are creating another material body, and akarma is basically freeing us or liberating us. Then he explains about the Adibhuta, Adidaiva and Adiyagnya in the 4th verse. So Adibhuta is basically Prakriti, or that is Kshara Bhava. Kshara means material nature, that is ever changing, which never stops changing, and which is manifesting and in manifesting again and again, which is coming into being, staying for some time, and then getting annihilated eternally. So that material nature or Prakriti, which is ever changing, is called Adibhuta. And then Purusha or Virata Rupa, in which all the Devatas reside and their planetary systems are there, which are the controlling deities of the different departments of this universal affairs or universal functions that are working eternally. Those are called Adidaiva. And Adiyagnya is, Krishna says that Adiyagnya aham evam atra, that in this body, and dehe deha bhrutamvara, and the super soul that lives in the heart, that is his own feature, aham, that is called Adiyagnya, or the Lord of the sacrifice. He is the supreme Lord of sacrifice. He is we read in 5th chapter that Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, that of all the yagna and tapa, all the sacrifices and austerities that are performed everywhere in the material or spiritual world, I am the supreme enjoyer. Bhoktar aham yagna tapasam. And he is the supreme controller, Sarva Loka, of all the 14 planetary systems in all the universes. Sarva Loka Maha Ishwaram, Maheshwaram. He is the supreme controller of everything. And Surudam Sarva Bhutana. He is also the best well-wisher friend of all the living entities. That's what we read in the 5th chapter, 29th verse. So that is Adibhuta, Adidaiva and Adiyagni. And then the last verse, what we read last week, was then the last question basically, Prayana Kale Chakatam Neyosinethatmabi. So from 5th verse onwards, Lord Krishna elaborates on that question. So this whole chapter, remaining chapter, is basically in what form, how, and can one remember Krishna, and what happens to people who don't remember Krishna, and how there are yogis who live in a body in certain way and they attain different planetary systems and how they come back and all that. And what is the destination of a devotee or bhakta, pure devotee of Krishna. So that's what is elaborated in from verse 5 to almost 28th verse. There are 28 shlokas in this chapter. So this whole chapter is dedicated on that particular question. And here in this very pertinent knowledge or very strong information he gives it, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. That at the time of death, or when one quits his body, antakal, when mam eva smaran muktva, when somebody leaves the body only thinking about me, that is Krishna. Yah prayati, that person, what happens? Yah prayati samad bhavam, that person, he attains my spiritual nature. Yati na asti atra samshaya. Of this there is no doubt. So this is, Krishna gives kind of guarantee here that he attains my spiritual nature without any doubt. So today we are going to continue from verse 6, shloka 6. So where he says what happens to the others who do not think of Krishna at the time of death or at the time of leaving this body. Okay, so let's recite this verse.
Yeah.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam.
Yam yam
Yam yam
Jajati.
vapi smaran bhavam.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
One more time. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
Okay, Jitu Prabhu, do you want to lead and we'll recite? We'll take a couple of recitations.
Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam.
Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
Yajadiyante kalevaram
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
Sada
sada
tadbhava bhavitah.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
Okay, Rajesh Anantaraman, do you want to lead and we'll follow you?
Yeah. So sorry, I am probably seeming a little faster because तो नेटचा काहीतरी प्रॉब्लेम दिसतोय मला आवाज नंतर येतोय.
Okay, no worries.
So I am getting a delay. Response or yam yam va vismaran bhavam
Yam yam
Yam
vapi smaran bhavam.
yajati ante kalevaram
Tyajatyante kalevaram.
tam tam evaiti kaunteya
Tam tamevaiti kaunteya.
sada tad bhava bhavita.
Sada tadbhava bhavitah.
Thank you very much, Rajesh Prabhu. So we'll do word for word meaning. So yam yam means whatever, jj, whatever. Va api means at all. Smaran means remembering. Bhavam means nature. Tyajati means gives up. What? Ante, at the end. Kalevaram, this body. Tam tam, te kiva similar. Eva, certainly. Eti means gets. Kaunteya means O son of Kunti. Sada means always. Tat means that. Bhava means nature or state of being. Bhavitaha means remembering. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So, in the previous verse, Krishna said that Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samad bhavam yati nastyatra samshaya. That at the end of time, or at the time of quitting this body, leaving this body, whoever thinks of me, he attains my nature, spiritual nature, or he comes to my spiritual world. But whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state, that type of nature or that type of body he will attain without fail. Yam yam vapi, yam yam va api, smaran bhava, tejati ante kalevaram, tam tam, that for sure, evaiti kaunteya, sada, always, tad bhava, there is no exception. So whatever one is thinking at the time of leaving this body, that type of body he will attain, or that type of nature he will attain for sure. So let's read the purport and we'll get a little bit more in details. Chandrakant Prabhu, you want to read the purport?
Oh. Purport. The process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. A person who at the end of his life quits his body thinking of Krishna attains the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. But it is not true that a person who thinks of something other than Krishna attains the same transcendental state. This is a point we should note very carefully. How can one die in the proper state of mind? Maharaj Bharata, although a great personality, thought of a deer at the end of his life, and so in his next life he was transferred into the body of a deer. Although as a deer he remembered his past activity, he had to accept that animal body. Of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thoughts at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life. If in one's present life one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not material. Therefore, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life.
Thank you very much, Chandrakant Prabhu. So, very powerful verse again, another one. So, it says that what will happen to us after leaving this body, whatever we were thinking at the time of quitting this body, that nature will attain for sure. So the process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is explained in this verse. The person who at the end of life remembers Krishna, he will attain the spiritual nature. That's what we read in the previous verse. Now here Prabhupada refers to Bharat Maharaj's example. So Bharat Maharaj, by whose name this whole planet at one time was known as Bharatavarsha, or the land of Bharatavarsha. So he is son of Rishabdev, and Rishabdev is one of the incarnations of Lord Krishna himself. So he incarnated and he had 100 sons. Out of them, Bharat Maharaj was the oldest son. So he became the king after that. So Bharat Maharaj, at a very young age, because he was spiritually inclined, he left after a certain time, he left his whole kingdom and planets and family behind and went to the forest and started living in a small kutir. And that's where he started just spending his time in the hermitage. thinking about Krishna, and he was completely absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna. But when once he was performing his daily routine as a day-to-day routine, he saw that on one of the creeks that was passing, that was flowing next to his hermitage, there was a deer, a she deer. She was crossing the creek and she was pregnant. And somewhere from the forest, a lion roared, and the roaring was so loud that the deer had a miscarriage, and then she gave birth to a fawn in that creek, and she died on the spot. So Bharat Maharaj felt pity on that deer, and so he grabbed that little baby or fawn and then brought it to his ashram, and he started protecting and taking care of that little fawn. So the fawn started growing, and then he started just running around Bharat Maharaj and then playing around him. So that just became another duty of Bharat Maharaj in his daily routine and daily ritual. And every time that fawn was just going around here and there. Fawn is the right word for a baby deer, right? What is the baby deer called? Fawn. So when it was going out of his sight, he would get worried for that baby, and then he would think about it. Oh, what would happen to him? Because this is a forest. There are very many wild animals live. Somebody might kill that deer, and that's how he somehow or other got absorbed in the thoughts of that deer. And eventually, when he left his body, he was, instead of thinking about Krishna, that's what he left whole his family and kingdom and everything. He was thinking more of a deer. And then the next birth, he has to take birth as a deer. And this story is very beautiful. It narrates, it gives an example how a small thing in our life we can get attached, and our thoughts can get absorbed in that thing. So it may not be our family or our kingdom or the most dear, our children, or many things. Any small thing we can get attached, and our thoughts can get absorbed in it, and then that may cause a hurdle in our spiritual growth. And that's what happened in the case of Bharat Maharaj. So he was born as a deer, but his consciousness never changed, because our developed consciousness, any spiritual consciousness we developed, we retain that. And in the deer body, he realized the mistake what he did, and then he stayed in the nearby that forest itself, where he is born as a deer, and he stayed around the sages there. And when he finished that lifetime of a deer, he was born again in the Brahminical family, and he was named again as a Bharat. But this time in the third birth after Bharat Maharaj, when he was born as Bharat, he realized, oh, I made a big blunder by getting attached to a deer. So he just played as a dumb person. And his father, being a Brahman, he tried to teach him all the Vedic literature, but he would just not pay attention and just act as a dumb person who would not understand anything. And that's why he was called Jada Bharat. Jada means Manda or Mati Manda. Somebody who is not active or not intelligent enough. But he was actually, in reality, he was a self-realized person. And then eventually, after his parents left this world, his brothers and his sisters-in-law, they thought that this is a dumb person. Why we should just take care of him? So they gave him some work. And then there is a long story. Actually, some dacoit stole him to give his sacrifice in front of Kali. And then they were about to kill him in front of Mother Kali. And then Kali came out of that Murti, and she killed her own devotees, because he was the Krishna's great devotee, and Kali is also Krishna's devotee. And then eventually, when he was wandering somewhere, he met a king named Ravuguna, and that's where he gave some very nice self-realized knowledge to King Ravuguna, and Ravuguna accepted him as his guru. And then there is very beautiful narration between his discussion with King Ravuguna. So that's a long story, but just that Prabhupada mentions here that King Bharat, Maharaj Bharat, although a great personality, thought of deer at the end of life. And so in the next life, in the immediate next life, he has to take birth as deer. And Srimad Bhagavatam is basically all the, in Bhagavad Gita, we learn all these instructions given by Krishna himself in theory, and Srimad Bhagavatam gives us the practical examples from history, according to Vedic evidence, of all these knowledge, the theoretical knowledge. So, but last time also we thought, can somebody think of determine what he can think of at the end of life? No. One develops a consciousness, a specific consciousness, how he lives throughout this life, and based on that, then he can think of certain things at the end of life. So it is possible to think of Krishna only when one spends life thinking about Krishna himself. And that's why it is important for us to purify, cleanse our mind. And that's why in all the Vedic literature, this mantra, we repeated several times, and maybe sometime I can bring some more references to where this mantra is referred. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is none other than Krishna himself, so he is the one who propagated this mantra about 550 years ago in the Kolkata, in the Navadvip Mayapur near Kolkata. And then all over the world, now he said that my name will be chanted all over the world. And today we see that his name is chanted all over the world. There are many places in the world which we don't know even the name of, and his name is being chanted every nook and corner of the world. That's what his prediction was. So, and this mantra has such an immense power. We talked about this. This is a very simple, but at the same time, very sublime mantra or process, which cleans our heart, which has been carrying dirt of all the anarthas, all the inauspicious things in our heart. And those are like basically kama, krodha, lobha, modha, matsarya. So all these different types of material desires, we get anger for some puny things, for very small petty things, and then desires, then greed. These are all impurities we have been carrying on our consciousness for I don't know how many lifetimes. And this mantra is said to be purifies our heart. And Sri Radhānath Goswami, actually, His Holiness Radhānath Goswami, he is one of the Prabhupada's disciples, and he mostly lives in Mumbai Chowpatty temple. So he once gave a very beautiful example. He said that our tongue, whenever we are chanting name of Krishna, or whenever we are chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, our tongue is so ferocious, just like Kaliya serpent, that it is spreading poison in our life. And it is making our life so poisonous that we cannot get out of this entanglement of material nature, this Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. or Mrityu Samsara Sagar. That's what Krishna refers several times. But when we are chanting name of Krishna, Krishna himself is dancing on our tongue and he's subduing our tongue, just like he subdued Kalia in the river of Yamuna. It's a very beautiful analogy. So when we are chanting holy name of Krishna, he is dancing on our tongue because his name and Krishna himself is not different. Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta Abhinnatvat Nama Namin. It is said that Nama Chintamani Krishna, Krishna's name is so pure, Chintamani Krishna, Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, and it adds energy or real happiness in our, he is the full form, Vigraha of full eternity or spirituality. And Purna Shuddha, it is completely pure without any contamination. And Nitya Mukta, it is ever liberated. And Abhinnatvat, it is not different, Nama and Nami. So Nama, his name, and Nami, the person himself, the holder of the name, they are non-different. That's what our scriptures say. And that's why Krishna and his name are non-different. And when we are chanting his name, we are actually, when we chant in complete, when we attain real chanting, that is called Shuddha Bhav, when we are chanting with completely pure Bhav, then we are actually associating with Krishna. So that's why, so coming back to today's verse, whatever we remember, that nature will attain for sure. And that's why we should always make our life in such a way that we should always try to remember Krishna. So there are a few verses actually I found. There are many, but some I thought will be very pertinent to today's verse. So let's read this. So this is verse from 4th canto in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th chapter. So we all know story of Dhruva Maharaj, right? So Dhruva Maharaj, when he was merely a 5-year-old boy, his stepmother did not allow him to sit on his father's lap when his step brother was sitting, Uttam was sitting. And she said that you are not allowed to sit here because you are not eligible, and if you want to ever sit on the father's lap or on that throne, you have to take birth from my womb, because your father doesn't like your mother, he only loves me. So he, being a Kshatriya blood, he got very angry and he started crying and went to his mother. And his mother said, what she said is true actually. But then he said, then how can I get something that nobody can move me from that place? Then he said, his mother, Suniti, she told him that everybody, all the sages say that one who worships Hari or Lord Narayan or Krishna, he is the one who fulfills everybody's all the desires, be they are material or if somebody wants liberation or whatever desire, he is the one who fulfills everybody's desire. And the great sages, they go to forest and think of him, meditate on him, and then that's where they ask for something to him. So this young boy, he's so determined that he left the palace and he started walking towards forest. And this news somehow went to Narada Muni, who is Trikaladarshi, being a eternal devotee of Lord Shri Krishna. So he came and met Dhruva Maharaj, and he stopped him and he said that, why are you going there? And then in that conversation, this verse comes. So when Narada Muni is instructing Dhruva Maharaj. So let's read, somebody can read the purport and translation. This is very pertinent to today's verse. Kiran Prabhu, do you want to read the
Yeah, sure.
translation and purport? Yeah. So this is Narada Muni telling Dhruva Maharaj, a young 5-year-old boy.
Translation: one should try to keep himself satisfied in any condition of life, whether distress or happiness, which is offered by the Supreme Will. A person who endures in this way is able to cross over the darkness of rescience very easily. Purport: material existence consists of flaws and impious fruitive activities. As long as one is engaged in any kind of activity other than devotional service, it will result in the happiness and distress of this material world. When we enjoy life in so-called material happiness, it is to be understood that we are diminishing the resultant action of our pious activities. And when we are put into suffering, it is to be understood that we are diminishing the resultant actions of our impious activities. Instead of being attached to the circumstantial happiness and distress resulting from pious or impious activities, if we want to get out of the clutches of this nescience, then whatever position we are put in by the will of the Lord, we should accept. Thus, if we simply surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we shall get out of the clutches of this material existence.
Thank you, Prabhu. So this basically Shubha and Ashubha, all things what we are doing. So we are experiencing the resultant of that. So if we are getting some material happiness, we are basically diminishing or burning our Shubha activities or the pious activities. And when we are suffering a little bit, then it is to be understood that we are burning our impious activities or our vikarma or whatever impious Ashubha activity we have done. So because of this, we are always, our mind is always absorbed in some or the other material activities. But somehow or other, when we get this understanding that this is automatically coming to me because of my past pious and impious activities, instead of being attached to the circumstantial happiness and distress that is created by the circumstances, different circumstances, we should think of what my original nature is, and somehow or other we should start thinking surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan Shri Krishna. So this is how our material life is kind of molded, and nobody works for getting distress, but it comes in the same way. Prahlad Maharaj also says in the 7th canto, and Narada Muni also, when he is instructing Vyasadeva in the 1st canto, 5th chapter, he explains that we don't work for dukkha, but dukkha automatically comes. In the same manner, even if we don't work for sukh, sukh also, whatever we are destined, will automatically come to us. And that's why we should try to understand that our life is based on our previous pious and impious activities, and we should mold it in such a way that we should be able to think of Krishna at the end of life. And that's how we develop our consciousness. And actually, this one chapter in 3rd canto, 30th chapter, this is such a beautiful chapter actually. This, even if we read just translation, it gives what a materialistic life a human being, how he lives, and how insignificant it is. But still, we are so attached to everything that we continue to live in that way, irrespective of however kicks we get from this material nature. So let's get some thoughts before. I was thinking of reading this, just translation, some verses, and then one of the purports. But let's get some reflections before we get there. So any thoughts on today's verse, Prabhuji?
So, Prabhuji, question here.
Yes.
It is said that what state of mind at the time of death, basically, or what you are thinking, right?
Mhm.
Usually it get the next birth based on that, right? Mostly.
Mhm.
So, but when the death is kind of delayed and the person is in it conscious before dying, right?
Mhm.
That time it's okay. But when the sudden death comes,
Mhm.
like let's say by accident or by anything, or even when the person is not aware of what is right, what is wrong, innocent persons kind of, before coming to that stage, knowing what is right, what is good, what is bad, what is Krishna, what is not, at the death comes that time, what happens then basically?
So even in case of sudden death, the person, the consciousness when it leaves, the mind and intelligence and false ego, the subtle body, what we call subtle body, is always there. And then the person who is dying, from others' perspective, it seems that he died suddenly. But
Mhm.
even at that moment, the thought, whatever comes to his mind, that is what determines his next life. And the thoughts typically come based on what the way we grew up, right, or whatever is very dear to our mind, the simple. So that's what happens. And the story, I think I'm thinking of one of the stories now. It was that one businessman, he is on a deathbed, and then it's kind of funny story, but very related to this, on a deathbed, and he is looking around us. So all his four sons and his servant and wife, everybody is around his bed. So he looks at his wife and he asks each son's name. Oh, where is first son's name? Say whatever, in maybe Chandu, or oh, he's here. She says that he's sitting next to you. Where is Nandu? He's sitting right on the other side of the bed. Oh, where is Bandu? He's sitting at your feet. And where is fourth son, the youngest one, Chotu? Oh, he's sitting also here. Or apna naukar kahan hai? Oh, he's also here. So they think that, oh, he's looking for everybody that they care. Then he says, oh, तो फिर दुकान में कौन है?
Kind of, yeah, okay.
सब लोग यहाँ है तो दुकान में कौन है? दुकान कौन संभालेगा? So he's even at the time of death, he's thinking about his business, what will happen to his business. And so that's what the consciousness is, right? Because that's what everybody thinks of, what is dear to him, what is more important to him. And that's what we need to find out. So, and even if something happens suddenly, that suddenly happens from the external world's perspective. But for him, he has to go through that certain pain, what he, at the time of death, what he is destined to, and his mind, intelligence, and false ego is active that time. And when he leaves this body, that goes with him. And mind is what does the function of thinking. The function of mind is thinking, feeling, and willing. Okay. So thinking is done by mind.
Mhm.
So the mind is active.
Okay.
So, and that thought in the mind, that is what determines the next body, that takes us to the next.
Mhm. Okay. But how about the innocent person? Means he's not reached to that stage to know about this. Let's say means for a low age kind of thing.
Okay.
Or the baby, fetus, just come out and died. Those kind of things.
So
Because
innocent person, it doesn't matter how old or how what he is, he still is going through his cycle of karma. And even if the young child dies, he dies because he was destined to die in that way because of some past activity or past karma he has done in his past life. And at that time, if whatever consciousness is developed, or the chain of cycle he is going through, the evolution process of the spirit soul that he is going through, that he attains the next body. Because based on, so we know that there are 8.4 million or 84 laksha yoni, 8.4 million different species of life. And then the categories are also given in Padma Purana. Jalajana Valakhani. There are 9 lakh aquatics who live underwater. Sthavara Lakshamimshati. There are 20 lakh botanical species, trees, plants, and all the kind of sthavara, which are immovable living entities. Sthavara Lakshamimshati. What is that? Krumayo Rudra Sankhyakamam. Krumi means reptiles and the insects. They are 11 lakh. So this is all given. Pakshinam Dasharakshani. There are 10 lakh species of Pakshi, birds. And Trimshala Lakshani Pashava. There are Pashu or the other animals. There are 30 lakh. And Chatur Lakshani Manava. 4 lakh kind of different human form of species. In that Devata, Rakshasa, Siddha, Charana. This is not only on this planet. This is for the whole universe. So these all species are evolving continuously from one body to another body. But only in human form of life, we accumulate karma. In all other forms of life, we are just diminishing or burning the karma what we have accumulated in human form of life. In that, all the other species of life, except for human, the 88 lakh species of life, no, not 80 lakh, 80 lakh species of life, they are just burning they don't accumulate any karma. For their activities, they don't gather any karma. They are just burning the karma what they have accumulated in the past. So that evolution is continuously happening. But only in human form of life, our consciousness is such developed, and we have been given an opportunity that we can learn about this knowledge, and then that is a chance we can use to get out of this cycle of birth and death. And that's why human form of life is mentioned in many scriptures, in many places, is very, 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 very rare. Because only in this form we can inquire about this knowledge, we can learn about this, and we can understand and apply this. Maybe I diverted a little bit, Sonu Prabhu, but does that help? So coming to your question, yeah. And ignorance is not an excuse. Ignorance actually it is said that our greatest sin is our ignorance.
Yes.
No, I was not talking about ignorance. I was talking about innocence, actually. The one who is innocent, basically.
Innocent is the same thing. If a child, because he's innocent, he puts his hand in a fire, will the fire think that, oh, this is just a merely child, he doesn't know that fire burns, I should not burn him? No, that doesn't work that way. The material nature works in such a way that it is working so perfectly that we cannot understand how it is achintya for us. And we don't know what that, we call that person as innocent because he is probably a just 2-year-old child or 1-year-old child. But we don't know what happened to him, what he has done in his past life. So it's a complicated topic. So it's not very easily understandable. That's why Krishna said in the 4th chapter, right, that Gahana Karmanogati, that karma's cycle is very, very difficult to understand. But we have this book. Krishna is trying to give us this knowledge. Now it's up to us to take it or not take it.
Yeah. Got it, Prabhuji. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that question comes to us very often. Yeah. Yes, any other thoughts, Prabhuji?
Prabhuji, one
Yes.
thing.
Yeah, Prabhu.
This question of the last thought, there is one very interesting story, at least on which our Hindus normally name their children after God. There was one man on his deathbed, and he knew he was going. So he just shouts out to his child, Madhava. Even in that last moment, when he's thinking of his child, he says the name of the Lord, and therefore supposed to have attained. Similarly, there was another story that Trichy Kalyana Sundaram often says. Narada once asks Mahavishnu, कि ये आपका नाम में इतना क्या है? What is it? So Mahavishnu is surprised. He says, you are calling out my name without even knowing this all these years? Of course, we all know what Narada was. He did it for a purpose. So he said, okay, now that you said that, see, there is one worm that is born. वो उसके कान में जाके ओम नमो नारायण बोलता, तो जाके बोलता है, it dies. Narada is a little shocked. He comes back, he says, what is this, oh Lord? I said your name and it died. Okay, now go, there is a rabbit that is just born. उसके कान में बोल. वो जाके बोलता है, even that dies. He comes back a little bit more shocked, saying, what is this, Prabhu? Your name, with whichever Jantu I am saying, it dies. He says, okay, do one thing. There is one deer that is born. Go say that in its years. That also dies. So by now, Narada is like really, बोलता है, भगवान मैं क्या करूं? I really am not understanding. He says, okay, there is a king who has just given birth to a child. Go say it in that child's ears. Now Narada is really shaken up. He says, all these nobody knew, but that is a king's son. What will happen to me? But he says, do as I say, go. He goes, he wants to meet the child. Everybody says, oh, Narada hai, to bachche ke saath, I mean, we are blessed. Narada is like really, dil mein uska dag dag ho raha hai, kya hoga? People are all like in awe. He goes, shuts off he says, I want to be with the child alone. And everybody goes out. He says to the child, Lord Narayana's name. And the child suddenly speaks up. He says, you said it in the ear of a worm. It died. I became a rabbit. You said it in the ear of the rabbit. I died and became a deer. You said it in the ear of the deer, and here I am. Now you understand what is the Mahima of Bhagavan Narayan. So this story he often says, wherever he has his provision, he ensures. And I mean, it's something that really, as Arjuna has also rightly asked, we can't determine what we are going to think at that time. But some of these things, like nowadays you have people naming their child Chunky and Monkey. But earlier days it was always, take whichever Hindu name, they were always of some god or the other, in the hope that at least वो time पे किसी बच्चे को याद करे. And I found that really very pertinent. This question has really a lot of depth.
Yeah.
And I mean, nobody can really determine how to tune to that before, unless from childhood you've been doing, this has been your main business. So, which is a very good question. I thought this was a very good answer, which is why I have named my child of the name of Devi.
Mhm.
And we also have another policy, or I don't know, a convention or a tradition, whatever you call it. The first male child gets the father's name. The second gets the mother's father's. The third is free for all. Okay, whichever God's name. Same is the case with the daughter. Every son's first daughter will have his grandmother's name. The second daughter, if any, will have the mother's name. This is basically also out of belief that it is our Pitros who come back into our lives regularly. So that is one of the reasons also why Hinduism never advocated abortions. You might kill your Pitros. So
Oh, these terms, they are not even, there are
Commitment.
no words for these terms actually.
Correct.
Thank you, bro. Thank you for sharing that. And
Thank
then
you.
the first story you shared, that is actually from Bhagavatam, Ajamil. Person's
Yes.
name is Ajamil. He names his
Ajamil.
son as Narayan, and he is at the deathbed.
Yes.
He does all the blunders, and he is like one of the very sinful person. But on the deathbed, he calls his son, and then the Yamadutas come to take him, but the Vishnu Dutas appear because he has called the name of Narayan. And then there is very beautiful conversation between Yamadutas and Vishnu Dutas. And then he is not given liberation, but he sees the conversation. Hears the conversation between the Yamadutas and Vishnu Dutas, and then he realizes that he wasted his life. And then he has given a second chance. Then he goes to Badrikashram and then spends remaining time in the worship of Krishna. So that's the story of Ajamil in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, very beautiful story. Yeah. And there are some very instructive verses in that. So anything before we go on to read that chapter, 30th chapter from 3rd canto? Okay, so let's read some verses. So how many? I was thinking of, I want to read the purport of 18th verse, and before that we'll read. So this is the instructions by Kapil Dev. Kapil is the son of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, and he is incarnation of Krishna himself. So because Kardama Muni did tapasya and he wanted to get son like Narayan, and because there is nobody like Narayan, so he said, okay, I'll become your son. And then he was born in the womb of Devahuti, that is Kardama Muni's wife. She is daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, as Kapila Dev. And then as soon as Kapila Dev was born, Kardama left for forest, giving when he was old enough, giving his mother's custody to his son, and that's the Vedic culture actually. So his mother Devahuti, she surrendered to her son, and she got instructions from him. And there are multiple chapters about instructions given by Kapila Dev to his mother Devahuti. And here he is instructing about the descriptions of the adverse fruitive activities. Adverse fruitive activities means the fruitive activities or karma that we perform which are not conducive for us for liberation. So everything that we are doing, or all the karmic activity, karma we are doing, that is keeping us bound in this material world, what type of karma those are, and how a person engages in that karma in spite of so many times he gets adverse effect. So how do we do this? Let me see who is online. So Rajesh Prabhu, Chandrakant Prabhu, Jitendra Prabhu, Kiran Prabhu. Okay, let's read 5 verses each. So let's start with Jitendra Prabhu. Do you want to start reading first 5 verses? Are you available, Jitu Prabhu, for reading?
तरी इंटरनेटचा काहीतरी प्रॉब्लेम
Oh, he just dropped. Okay, so let's do 6 verses each, and let's start with Rajesh Prabhu. Anantaraman, yeah.
The personality of Godhead said, as the mass of clouds does not know the powerful influence of the winds, the person engaged in material consciousness does not know the powerful strength of the time factor by which he is being carried. Whatever is produced by the materialist with great pain and labor for so-called happiness, the Supreme Personality as the time factor destroys, and for this reason, the conditioned soul laments. The misguided materialist does not know that his very body is impermanent, and that the attraction of home, land, and wealth, which are in relationship to that body, are also temporary. Out of ignorance only he thinks that everything is permanent. The living entity, in whatever species of life he appears, finds a particular type of satisfaction in that species and is never averse to being situated in such a condition. The conditioned living entity is satisfied in his own particular species of life, while deluded by the covering influence of the illusory energy. He feels little inclined to cast off his body, even when in hell, for he takes delight in hellish enjoyment. Takes such satisfaction with one's standard of living is due to deep-rooted attraction for body, wife, home, children, animals, wealth, and friends. In such association, the conditioned soul thinks himself quite perfect.
This is our life.
Hmm.
So that's what he's explaining. So Chandrakant Prabhu from 7 to 12.
Although he is always burning with anxiety, such a fool always performs all kinds of mischievous activities with a hope which is never to be fulfilled in order to maintain his so-called family and society. He gives heart and sense to a woman who falsely charms him with Maya. He enjoys solitary embraces and talking with her, and he is enchanted by the sweet words of the small children. The attached householder remains in his family life, which is full of diplomacy and politics, always spreading miseries and controlled by acts of sense gratification. He acts just to counteract the reactions of all his miseries, and if he can successfully counteract such miseries, he thinks that he is happy. He secures money by committing violence here and there, and although he employs it in the service of his family, he himself eats only a little portion of the food thus purchased, and he goes to hell for those for whom he earned the money in such an irregular way. When he suffers reverse in his occupation, he tries again and again to improve himself, but when he is baffled in all attempts and is ruined, he accepts money from others because of excessive greed. Thus, the unfortunate man, unsuccessful in maintaining his family members in bereft of all beauty, he always thinks of his failure, grieving very deeply.
Okay, this is what general life is. We can relate to this.
वाल्यापुढे आठवत होते.
हा आणि किरण प्रभू. So next 6. Yeah.
Seeing him unable to support them, his wife and others do not treat him with the same respect as before, even as misery farmers do not accord the same treatment to their old and worn out oxen. The foolish family man does not become averse to family life, although he is maintained by those who he once maintained. Deformed by the influence of old age, he prepares himself to meet ultimate death. Thus, he remains at home just like a pet dog and eats whatever is so negligently given to him. Affiliated with many illness such as dyspepsia and loss of appetite, he eats only very small morsels of food, and he becomes an invalid who cannot work anymore. In that disease condition, one's eyes bulge due to the pressure of air from within, and his glands become congested with mucus. He has difficulty breathing, and upon exhaling and inhaling, he produces a sound like gura gura, a rattling within the throat. In this way, he comes under the clutches of death and lies down, surrounded by the lamenting friends and relatives. And although he wants to speak with them, he no longer can because he is under the control of time. Thus, the man who engaged with uncontrolled senses in maintaining a family dies in great grief, seeing his relatives crying. He dies most pathetically in great pain and without consciousness. At death, he sees the messengers of the Lord of Death come before him, their eyes full of wrath, and in great fear he passes stool and urine. As as a criminal as a criminal is arrested for punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification is similarly arrested by the Yamadutas, who bind him by the neck with strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment.
I think this continues further how he goes to different punishments and everything. But you get a gist. This is how general life people live here. And then there was today related to today's verse. This was the purport I was thinking of reading. So here he says, what happens to at the time of death? So today we are talking about at the time of death. That's the man who engaged in uncontrolled senses in maintaining a family dies in great grief. Seeing his relatives crying, he dies most pathetically, in great pain and without consciousness. So this is where Chandrakant Prabhu, your question was, without consciousness. But here, Prabhupada refers to in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that at the time of death, one will be absorbed in the thoughts which he cultivated during his lifetime. A person who had no idea than to properly maintain his family members must have family affairs in his last thoughts. That is a natural sequence for a common man. The common man does not know the destiny of his life. He is simply busy in his flash of life maintaining his family. This life is called flash of life because as compared to the eternity, how many millions and billions of lifetimes we are living, this one lifetime is just a flash of life. At the last stage, no one is satisfied with how he was improved the family economic conditions. Everyone thinks that he could not provide sufficiently. Kitna bhi karo, sab kami padta hai. Because of his deep family affection, he forgets his main duty of controlling the senses and improving his spiritual consciousness. So this is our main duty. Savai pumsa paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje. Sometimes a dying man entrusts the family affairs to either his son or some relative, saying, I am going, please look after my family. He does not know where he is going, but even at the time of death, he is anxious about how his family will be maintained. Sometimes it is seen that a dying man requests the physician to increase his life at least for a few years so that the family maintenance plan which he had begun can be completed. These are the material diseases of the conditioned soul. He completely forgets his real engagement, that is to become Krishna conscious. And he is always serious about planning to maintain his family, although he changes families one after another. So the family, what we have here, the country, what we associate with, the society, what we associate with, is related to this body which is temporary. But we are eternal, and our eternal nature, the constitutional position, is actually to serve Krishna, because we have an eternal relation. And that's the whole purpose of this Vedic knowledge. And this is how we spend our life. And this is what this is how our consciousness is developed when we are about to leave this body. And that's what determines where we are going to go after leaving this body. So even for going on vacation, or if I have to travel to India from here, I make so much plans in advance. I start thinking about buying a ticket, getting some plans arranged. Oh, this is what I'm going to take. This is where I'm going to do. This is how I am going to travel and everything. This is what I'm going to carry. I have so much plans for going to India or any vacation or any business trip or anything, wherever I am going. But there is one trip I know for sure I am going, but I don't know when. Nobody plans for that. And that's the trip everybody has to make. That's the one-way trip. That's leaving this body and going somewhere. I don't know where. And that's the one we never ever inquire. And that inquiry, when we start thinking about, and when we are start reading the scriptures and starting to understand what will happen to us, then that is what is the goal of human life. Because that inquiry can be possible only in human form of life, not any other form of life. So, thank you, Prabhuji. Any thoughts on the chapter, what we read, or? It may seem too much, what do you call? What is the word I was looking for? Pessimistic.
Mm.
But that's the life. If we read all, and this is not somebody written by somebody, this is coming from our scriptures. These are all verses spoken by the Bhagwan himself.
बरोबर. वस्तुस्थिती सांगितलेली
Agdi direct.
डायरेक्ट वस्तुस्थिती. हा.
So this is what our
आणि म्हणजे ते नकळतपणे आपण करतच राहतो, वाहवत जातो, त्याच्यात जाणवत नाही फक्त ते.
because of ignorance, we don't know what our real. This is what we think. Oh, I have to take care of my family. Who will take care of it? And I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to do this.
They have their own destinies. So.
And then I don't even think about what is the real duty or what is the real priority I should have in this life. You can finish reading this chapter. Actually, there are about 30 some verses, I guess. We read up to 20 today, right? 34 verses. Yeah. But I just thought these were pertinent to something today's verse. So we can at least get a gist of general life, how a general conditioned soul in this material world spends in a human form of life. So any additional thoughts before we stop today, Prabhuji? I think it is almost the time. We read only one verse, but there were so much things we could cover. So I thought, okay, we can touch those points a little bit.
Prabhuji, I think,
Yes,
yeah, मागच्या वर्ष मध्ये अनंत काले
Antakale.
अंतकाले what should we should remember God, where it appears as if very easy that okay at the end you just remember God and you are free from all this. But now this verse makes it realize that again Bhagwan is telling that it's not that those who remember me throughout life, and then they will remember me at the end. That is what the realization probably I could get through this verse. That means, yeah, sada tadbhava bhavita, last je hai. You should remain in Krishna consciousness throughout your life. Then only at the end you will remember him, and तेव्हाच तुम्हाला खरी मुक्ती मिळेल याच्यात.
And we'll continue this last question of Prayana Kale. That is what whole chapter is about, remaining chapter. So this subject continues for the rest of the chapter.
Yeah.
So in the next verse, he says what should be done then.
Mhm.
So
And very true, miss. We all would think that our family and that we are all throughout the day, night, probably we are thinking of that only. What is our real priority? We forget and we get
and
engaged into all.
it's not that we should not do, but
Yeah,
we should
पण
do that with the right
Yeah.
attitude. Yeah.
And probably sometimes we unnecessarily get worried also, miss, like, and then that also diverts our mind.
Mhm.
Like, there are certain things which you cannot control, miss, and we try to control those things, thinking that we can change it, but we can't really do it.
But when we learn this, I think that's where study of Bhagavad Gita helps. At least we get some perspective. It's not that we are not going to have miseries in our life after studying Bhagavad Gita or on all that stuff, but at least it subsides sooner.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
still will have some dukkha, we still will have some pain, we still will have suffering. But then the perspective comes, oh, I am probably destined to this. And the real attitude actually, Brahmaji says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, that the devotee of the Lord, he accepts this as mercy of the Lord, even the suffering.
Yeah.
And then he thinks, his attitude is always that, oh, I probably am deserving more pain, but Krishna is so merciful that he's giving me little pain so that I can bear it.
Yeah. Yeah. As you said rightly, it changes the complete perspective. Otherwise, and that helps you to come out of that situation.
Yes, thank you, Kiran Prabhu.
पण ट्रॅडिशनली जर आपण बघितलं किंवा वॉट आर स्टोरीज वी कम अप विथ हिअर राईट की बाबा अ पर्सन म्हणजे कर्ता पुरुष जो म्हणतो घरातला ऑलवेज कीप थिंकिंग अबाउट द फॅमिली वेल बिंग ऑफ फॅमिली किड्स हुएवर इन द फॅमिली इन्क्लुडिंग देअर फूड शेल्टर कन्व्हिनियन्स मीन्स मला कन्व्हिनियन्स नाही झाला तर चालेल पण मला माझ्या फॅमिलीला व्यवस्थित ठेवायचंय गो फॉर दिस पॉलिसी दॅट पॉलिसी माझ्या नंतर त्यांची हाल नको व्हायला सो वी गेट सो मच एन्टँगल्ड अँड बेसिकली सराउंडिंग मुळे मला वाटतं द काइंड ऑफ थिंग वी कीप सीइंग कीप फॉलोइंग कीप हिअरिंग आय थिंक इट इन्फ्लुअन्स अ लॉट ऍक्च्युअली
That
Right.
comes with the ignorance, and that's where I think it's not that we should not maintain family. We should do, that is our responsibility
Yeah.
as a grihastha to maintain our family. But as soon as we think that I am the one who is doing and I am in control and it is my complete responsibility, because we read in third chapter, right? Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudha atma karta aham iti manyate. That Krishna is anyway maintaining everything. I am doing my part, but ultimately Krishna's material nature is working and it is facilitating me all these situations, or it is putting me in certain circumstances which I am acting. That doesn't mean that I can give up everything, as until I am completely in the spiritual consciousness, I should not give up any kind of material thing. So I should continue doing that, but at the same time, I should understand that even though I am maintaining my family, it is actually Krishna who is giving me strength, and he is the one who is ultimately maintaining. And even if at certain point of time, even if I have to leave this body, he will take care of this. Because we see all around the world, in this world, nothing stops because of somebody.
That's true. Yeah.
However great that person may be.
True.
The world goes on. So, but it's our ahankar that keeps us binding that, oh, मेरे बाद क्या होगा?
भारा तांबे जनपळ भरवंतील हाय हाय.
जन पळभर म्हणतील हाय. या. त्याचं शेवटचं कडवं तेच आहे ना. हरी
रामकृष्ण आले गेले त्याविन जग का ओसची पडले.
नाही नाही
ते
हरी
म्हणत.
हरी नावा का विमुख व्हावे.
अच्छा, एवढं नाही आठवत मला. फक्त या 2 लाईन जनपळ भरवंतील हाय हाय आणि रामकृष्ण आले गेले त्याविन जग का ओसची पडले, एवढं 3.
And the last stanza actually brings to this spirituality that, oh, I should not, हरीच्या नावाला मी विमुख न व्हावे.
ओके,
That is
वाचायला लागेल ती,
that
बघायला
I
लागेल.
should do. I have to come, look that also. But yeah, thank you. Okay, Rajesh Prabhu, any final thoughts before we stop today, or
No, that's it.
so? Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for your association.
Thank you very much.
We'll continue our
Krishna.
journey of studying
Yeah.
Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभूजी.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.